our 6 honorees, and I'll just introduce you. I'm just going to save time with the introduction so that we have more time for questions and discussion. We have Lynn Selden, son of Wendell Selden, B.J. Dove, daughter of Eddie Manuel, Christy Potts, daughter of Russ Potts, David Rice, son of Lon Rice, Kitty Zuckerman, daughter of Charlie Zuckerman, and Mick Powers, son of David Powers. Thank you all for being here. I'll quickly mention, there were many honorees that we could have included in this program. I wish that we had a much bigger stage and a much longer day, and we could have had 20, 25 honorees with their sons and daughters up here. But there are limits, and we are very happy with who we have here today. Christy wanted me to point out that she herself is not a Handley graduate, but she did go to 2 Handley proms.
That qualifies.
Her 2 sisters are Handley grads, and of course, as the daughter of Russ Potts, she has maroon and white in her blood, for sure. Okay, so what do you think is causing the mic feedback? Is that me?
I don't know if it's you or us.
All right. So, I'm going to launch into some questions for them. This is not really rehearsed, although I did tell them an idea of the questions that I would be posing. And some, if you all, I'm not sure that I will call on all of you for all of these questions, or if you really want to answer it, just give me a little indication. We'll start with my first question, which is, the write-ups about your fathers are, of course, full of accomplishments and contributions. But let's try to get a better sense of their personalities and their traits from your perspective, and the perspective of other family members, because I know we've talked to your brothers and sisters, mothers. What 3 adjectives come to mind in describing your dads? And if you need to elaborate a little bit, that's okay, but we'll just keep it fairly tight. So we'll start with Lynn.
Go down that way. For me, I reached out to my siblings like Greg, who's here, and asked them, and I kept getting back S words for some reason, adjectives. And so I basically came up with supportive. My father was incredibly supportive of our family, but also of anyone in Winchester, anyone at Handley. Mr. Ump's can attest to that for sure. Smiling. My father was always smiling. Great smile, great laugh. And I have 2 more. One, service-minded between the city, the National Guard, and officiating, and so much more, very service-minded. And the 4th, my brother sort of alluded to in his eulogy. He was always sparkling. And that was because my mother would shine his brasso, with brasso on his buckle for when he went to National Guard, and his officiating, his shoes were always shiny. He was always sparkling, and that was my notable mom. So.
I kind of did the same thing. I called my brother and said, I'm sending you this list of questions that Kim sent me. Let's have some answers here to help. And so between the 2 of us, we sort of came up with a couple. I think any of you that knew Dad know that he was very community-minded, starting with Handley, and everything else came next. I think, Mr. Ump, you can probably attest to that. He was also an excellent fundraiser, and I'm sorry to say for the JAA and Handley that did not come down the gene lines. It stopped with Dad. I'm terrible. I can believe in a cause right and left, but I can't ask people for money. And he was very resourceful. He would go anywhere and ask anybody for anything as long as it was a cause that he believed in, rather it was Handley, the JAA, the Lions Club, which he helped to start, the Shawnee Lions Club here in Winchester. And he just, if he felt good about a cause, he was willing to do whatever he could to make things happen. Christy?
Hi, 3 adjectives. Family, faithful, and friendly. I remember walking at SMU. We were going to church at Highland Park, and he turning to me and says, "Christy, I love your mother more now than the day I married her." They have a wonderful marriage, 56 years. They came out with 3 kids, myself, the eldest, and a bunch of grandkids and son-in-laws. Faithful. He had deep faith. Prayed every day. Put his faith in God. And that's really what drove him. Friendly. That guy talked to everybody. I don't care who you are. You could be picking up trash on the side of the road and he's going to be talking to you. Probably most likely about how great Handley is, asking them how the football team is going to be next year.
Okay, I'm the race with the hair. The 3 I came up with were driven. I think my elementary school days were a little bit different from a lot of kids my age. They're watching the Brady Bunch in room 222, and I'm looking at game film on the living room wall, and like the same play over, backwards, forwards, backwards. What is he looking at? But the next one, it would be motivational. Bill Sardellis told me a story about, 6 or 8 years ago, about how they were playing Clark County, who, before the James Wood rivalry got so big, Clark County was the big power. And they came to Handley and were 20-point favorites, and we were ahead, and they were driving down the field at the end of the game, goal line stand, Dad calls timeout, and Bill goes running over to the sideline. What do you want? You want to change the setup or the play? No. You just tell them, if you ever wanted to play football, now's the time to play it. And that stuck with me. But then the other thing I would say is balanced. And with Dad, a lot of people, they spit out 43-5-2 or, football coach, but it was about a whole lot more than football, and it was about how to live your life. And hopefully we'll get into that a little later. If y'all want to use that mic. Take this away from me.
No comment.
I also reached out to my siblings, and we couldn't stick with 3, I'm sorry. But we came up with loyal, dependable. If you needed anything, you called Charlie, and he was there. Selfless, giving, caring, generous, family and community-oriented, disciplined, amazingly disciplined, and most of all, funny. And that's what I miss the most. He made me laugh every single day until he died.
As I think we talked about with everybody else, we shopped this a little bit out, and the 3 that we came up with for Dad were, number 1, comfortable. He was always comfortable living in his own skin, didn't need to be anybody else. And I think anyone that met him knew that. Prepared, which is a little bit of a double entendre, speaking to his many years with the Boy Scouts, but also that man could not be fazed by anything, and I'm really jealous of that. In my life, being in the ER here for 30 plus years, there were a few situations that he wasn't prepared for in one way or another, or at least could respond to. I sometimes feel that I miss my calling and being like a shock trauma nurse, because whenever something would go wrong, he would just start barking orders, and then that was that. I wasn't given a choice but to help. And enthusiastic, which I think is kind of a thing that we've talked about up and down the table. He loved talking to people, especially about the things that he was passionate about. Mom and I both say that he could talk to a fence post and make the fence post talk back. He could talk to anyone about anything and trying to find whatever that equalizing force was with the people that he was speaking with.
I think they passed question number 1 very well. And we'll start with you on this one, Nick, if you want.
Sure.
So we're here obviously because Handley High School is celebrating its 100th anniversary. So tell us, if you can, one story about your father's time at Handley, something funny or something touching, maybe something that we haven't heard before, or just something that was important to him when he was at Handley.
Yeah, Mom and I talked a little bit about whether we should tell the story, but I think it's an important one. Dad graduated from Handley in 1975, so as integration was taking place actively, there was unrest at the school. And at one point, he received a phone call from another student in Handley, one of the white kids, who he was trying to organize an effort to lock the black students out the following morning. And Dad said, yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there against you, trying to make sure to do the right thing. Dad was on the basketball team. He kind of only played when the game had already been decided, whether they're winning or losing. That was when David Power stepped on the court. But, so he called Mac Williams. Hey, if you knew Dad was, I think it's somewhere between 6'2" and 6'3". Mac was also a big guy. And the next morning, Dad stood at one door and Mac stood at the other to make sure that, that nothing happened. That people would have equal access to the school, to their education. And surprise, surprise, nothing happened. It was a lot of bluff, but just that presence there, standing for what was right. Mom and I talked a little bit about whether we should tell that story, because of the various implications. But it's an important story of how united Handley students can be.
Glad you did.
Good.
This one stumped us, honestly, because none of us could really remember any stories Dad told about high school. And so we think he may or may not have climbed the smokestack.
You mean he said he did, but you're just not sure if it was true?
Something like that.
I'm gonna call it a ringer on this one. There's a story that Gene Schultz witnessed firsthand, and he can tell it better than I can if he's willing to share it.
Sure, I'll pass you my microphone, Gene, or you can come right here beside me. But also, while he's coming down, David, tell us how old you were when your dad died.
I was 11.
Okay, so David's perspective on this panel is a little different. He was very young.
A lot of people say I've never gotten out of elementary school.
Maybe wondering about this. I was in Coach Rice's, he was my homeroom teacher my senior year. Fall of 70, Haley and James Wood were going into it. They were undefeated. Russ Potts had done everything he could in town to whip everybody up into this game. It was going to be the greatest game of the universe. And I was coming into the homeroom. Everybody else was gone. One of the coaches walked in, and Coach Rice said, okay, I want you to take the team out, do the calisthenics, run drill 1, 2, and 3. I have an 8th grader who needs some help with math, and I'll be out when I finish.
Wow. Wow.
As many of you know, my father loved Handley, loved his time there. As some of you may know, he was very poor. He grew up very poor, but the teachers throughout the Winchester School District took care of him from the time he joined to the time he graduated. In terms of memories, it's got to be the pranks he played. He was notorious for cherry bombs and putting a tack on a desk for a teacher that kept pounding the desk and pounding right on it. Burning down the cornfield. Oh, that was a great story. It came up later when I was being interviewed for a job at the FBI, and they kept hearing me and said, have anyone in your family ever been arrested? How do you explain he tried to burn a cornfield down and keep a straight face? So he had, bottom line, he had a great time here. and loved the school and continues to love the school.
Russ Potts was the origin of grass-fed beef.
I really don't have any one story to tell from when Dad was in school. He just always spoke of it as the best time of his life was going to Handley. And he started at Handley. He was born and raised here in Winchester. And I think his love of Handley just in everything he did kind of shone through. So I don't really have any good stories to tell on him because he was also a very smart man. He never shared things that would come back on him. I don't have any doubt that there were probably some I should be able to share, but he was smart enough not to tell us.
Gene, I don't think this was in your great write-up on my dad, but my dad was voted best looking in his class, and we didn't learn that till recently. And my mom, the year later, was best dressed as well. I have a picture of him that attests to that. It's pretty cool. I just learned that recently. Is that right?
All right. So I'll give credit to Jean for suggesting this question. The men we are honoring here today, your fathers, each is a legend in this community in his own way, with kind of a larger-than-life persona. But I want you to tell us a story that really shows that your dad was a down-to-earth human being. Just kind of humanize the myth, the legend. And we'll start with you.
Go the other way? Back and forth. So many of those as far as the human side of my dad. One that came up with all of us was our time actually away from Winchester down in Virginia Beach at a place called Camp Pendleton. My father was with the National Guard, and he would go to Army camp every 2 weeks every summer for 40-some years. And that was our summer vacation. We stayed in barracks to start with, and we couldn't afford to go anywhere else. And he would take us along, and he would go do maneuvers and come back all sweaty and in his BDUs, his uniform, and we'd be at the beach. But the human side of him, where he could serve the National Guard, but then be a family man most evenings at Camp Pendleton. We recently did a reunion there without my parents, but Camp Pendleton welcomed us back, the state did. And we stayed in a cottage. I think we had 42 of us. So definitely that showed the human side of my dad.
And you need to talk about it.
We did.
I think one of the things that always impressed me about my dad that I didn't know until he did pass away at quite a young age, as you probably already know. When he retired from the post office, he went to work the next day selling real estate. It had always been a dream of his to help people that had trouble getting their first homes or a new home or whatever. And when he passed away, I had the job of going to close out accounts and things for him here in Winchester. And one of the ladies that was at the Lighthouse Bank out on Valley Avenue told me that I noticed when I started doing this that I had all these banks. They didn't all have a whole lot of money in them. It might be a savings account or a checking account or a loan, but I had to go close them all out. Come to find out, the first house my dad sold was to a young couple, and it was their first house. They had lived out at the Garden Apartments for years because it was income-based, and they'd been saving their money, and this lady happened to be the babysitter for my daughter. So here Dad went and found him a house and a piece of land in the county, about as far from my house as you could get, and they had trouble getting their first loan to get a house because they had never owned any homes or anything. So Dad went to every bank in Winchester, thank heavens there weren't as many then as there are now, and talked to a loan officer and opened an account in every bank so that he knew who to send people to talk to get a loan when they needed a house.
That's awesome.
The good side was really good for them. The bad side was I had to take death certificates to every bank in town and close all those accounts for him. But that was just, Dad just felt like that was something he could do to help his first-time clients be able to own something in the city of Winchester, and that family still owns the first house they bought when they bought it from him.
Hi, as I mentioned before, my father grew up very poor, and one of the things I remember about him, he told me how he used to do milk and paper routes to basically make money for clothes. So I didn't realize until after he passed away that he understood how hard it was to make a living, and he tipped everybody, tipped people you don't normally think about. He tipped the McDonald's staff when they gave him a hamburger. But I also remember the story he told me right before he died. He wanted to take a trip up to Handley to basically put some wreaths on the graves. And he told me a story. He goes around, he's on oxygen at this point, so we're all thinking about how long is this tank going to last? But he pointed to this house and told us a story about how his father helped him one time on his paper route. So he said, go up in that house and knock on the door and give him the paper. Well, he didn't tell him there was a big, mean dog there. So he walks up to the house, the dog snaps at him, and my father's father looked back and said, I'm never doing this with you again.
Sorry, but Terry McAuliffe also told a story at Russ's memorial service where he said, you know what he's doing now? He's chasing the Lord around and telling him, you know, if we could just widen these pearly gates by 6 feet on each side, we could get 1,000 more people in here. I love that story because that was Russ. Okay, I might get a little verklempt on this one, but I was 7 or 8 years old. We lived on Miller Street across from the Maddoxes, or kind of diagonally. And there was a knock at the door one evening, and like I said before, this goes way beyond football. And I, as the little busybody that I was, you know, I was the first to the door and opened the door, and here's one of, I'm not going to use a name, but a big, beefy lineman that I knew standing there on our front porch with tears streaming down his face. And I was like, what? I just couldn't comprehend it. I didn't know what was going on. And I didn't ask my mom for at least 25 or 30 years. And she said that this player's father was beating his mother, and he didn't know where to turn except to his coach. And that was a whole family enterprise. My part was they sent me to my room. But anyway, that was a pretty touching moment. So you all want to use that mic?
Again, I reached out to my siblings, and they gave me a couple of ideas. When we were little, Dad would take us trick-or-treating, and he would dress up like a woman, and he had a fake tooth in front. He would take out his tooth, so he was a toothless woman, and he would walk us all over the neighborhoods so we could go trick-or-treating. And we just thought that was the best. And when he was mayor, he rode on the refuse collection truck to support the workers. And he had, they took a big picture of him on the truck, and all of the workers signed the matting around the photo and gave it to him. It was really sweet. I still have it, along with a lot of other things in my basement. But he never met a stranger, as you all probably know, and in his eyes, everybody was equal.
We came up with 2 short stories, and we think of Handley as the city school, but Dad was the rare John Handley farm boy. My grandparents' farm on the edge of town was later annexed into the city. Yes, and then my grandparents also had a farm out in Strasburg that had cattle, and the cattle always get out at the most inopportune times. So one night he was chasing cows across probably half of Frederick, Shenandoah, and Warren counties, and went to school the next day, and he was just so sluggish. And the teacher sent him to the principal's office because he was falling asleep in class. And the principal said, David, what's wrong with you? And he said, oh, I'm sorry, I had cows. And they said, just go home, go to sleep, come back the next day. So that story, and then this is a little kind of adjacent to Dad a little bit, but Dad was also the drum major for the Handley Band and was directing the band during the end of year March to Handley's Tomb. And as they were, in my day, you were stationary, which maybe were the lesson I learned a little bit, but they were marching into the cemetery. Dad is trying to, this is a solemn occasion as you're coming in, and Mom and I disagreed a little bit whether it was a drummer or someone with a tuba, but they tripped over one of the gravestones, so you have this horrendous crash as they're working their way through. Dad, he just continues doing his thing, leaving the band as it goes by, and so, didn't quite fix it.
All right, this one might not be too hard. Of all the things that your father accomplished in his life, what do you think he would be most proud of if he were here today to answer that question? We'll start with you, Nick.
So I think the answer definitely would be all the people that he helped in the various ways here locally. We could not go out somewhere without someone, coming up to us and saying, oh, did you know that your dad saved my life? And what do you say to that?
Oh, by the way.
By the way. It got to the point where people would come up to me and they say, oh, I saw your dad recently, and I'd say, I'm sorry, what happened? Because usually, if someone saw him, that meant that they ended up in the ER and they were having a really bad day, and hopefully get something to make their days a little bit better. And he was very much a person who, whatever was best for the patient was what was prescribed. He would stay after his shift to finish charts and to make sure that everyone that he had seen that day either had been discharged and had gotten home, or they were admitted to the ER for whatever it was they needed. So those are some of the first ones that came to mind.
Dad was really proud of his community service, of course, but I personally think the big thing was his blood donations. When he found out he had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, he was the most upset that he couldn't give blood anymore. It wasn't the fact that he had cancer, it was that he couldn't make it to 40 gallons. So he only did 38 gallons, and that was very upsetting to him, but still quite an accomplishment and something to be proud of. And as we were growing up, of course, we were all expected to give blood, or we didn't get our allowance.
Wow, 38 gallons. In Gene's write-up of the notables, and I'm not sure I knew that figure, but 30 players who played college ball after coaching here 5 years. And I'm not sure if they all had scholarships. The majority of them did. But I think he would never say it, but he would be most proud of building men and young women of character, and also giving them opportunities that they might otherwise not have had. I don't know if Monty Hinkle or Jerry Partlow would have gone to college if they hadn't, had an opportunity through athletics. And different people learn different ways. And some people learn in the classroom, and other people learn on the field or on the basketball court. And I was at Apple Blossom somewhere along Handley Boulevard. I'm not sure I can remember whose house. Like 6 or 8 years ago, and this guy comes up to me that I didn't recognize and says, if it weren't for your dad, I'd be in prison. And
Wow.
like I said, way beyond football, it goes way beyond that. So I'll stop.
What would my dad be most proud of by far is his work with the Winchester Educational Foundation. I remember the day that they did the opening, we came. We didn't know it was close to my father's end, but he came up to me and he sat down. He's like, I'm sorry I'm not going to spend more time with you. I said, hey, Toe, I totally get it. And I turned to him and I said, your legacy will be the Innovation Center. That is your legacy. And I do find it highly ironic that of all the rooms they decided to name was the office for him, since he spent most of his high school years in the office.
Well, I didn't have any trouble answering that question because having known my dad for all the years that I did, there was nothing, including me, Mom, Scott, nothing, as important to him as the JAA. So hands down, the fact that he was able to co-found the Judges Athletic Association was the one thing he was always proudest of.
For me, I'm going to change up a little bit. The immediate answer that my family talked about would be my dad's legacy of family. But something came up recently. It was a retelling. But my dad would also be really proud of the service-minded people that followed in his footsteps. It's just unbelievable. You could list them. Last night, Beth Kellis Burton retold a story to me. Basically, she would not be a notable if it wasn't for my dad and Russ Potts. Bottom line, she said, there's no way that I would be where I am without them. And leaving that kind of thing, I think he would be most proud of.
All right, so I'm going to switch it up just a little bit and continue on the family theme here and invite you, if you'd like, as part of this question, to recognize any of your family who's here today and or anybody who's not here who helped you with preparing for today. But question 6 that I've shown you guys, obviously your father would not have been the man that he was if not for your mother and her role in his life. So I'm inviting you to say a few words about that relationship, if you'd like, and also talk about any of the other family members.
I sort of alluded to earlier, my mother packed his bags, literally, for refereeing, for National Guard, his duffel bag, for going to city manager conventions, on and on. My brother mentioned that I brought up a memory of always the house smelling like shoe polish. Remember the black kiwi shoe polish? Because my mother shined his city manager shoes and his refereeing shoes and his boots for the National Guard. So the house sometime during the week was going to smell like boot polish or Brasso when it's shining his brass. I think she sort of skipped a 6, sort of in a way. You sort of tied 5 and 6 together. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to come back to 5
Yeah.
and combine it with 7.
There we go. So basically, the smell of kiwi and Brasso is my mother's contribution in a great way. She was literally a notable mom. And a shout out to my brother Greg, who's here, and my sister Bev, other middle brother Steve, all Handley graduates, and too many grandchildren and great-grandchildren to count. So, by the way, my dad's here in spirit. This is his. I found it in my closet. I think it would fit my forever skinny brother better than me. Thank you. Wow. That's a legacy.
I would, in thinking about that question, I know that Mom was always there to help Dad with things with JAA. I can remember he didn't tell us Handley stories, but he did tell us JAA stories about he and Don Smallwood and Don's wife Florence, who was the president of the class of 48. They would get together at Mom and Dad's and go down in the basement and paint signs for the Judges Athletic Association for their yearly banquet. We had tons of those signs around for a long time. Donald used to paint all of those. And it was just wherever they went, the 4 of them were always working on things for Handley. And so Mom was right there with them all the way through doing things. Matter of fact, my mom taught school in the city of Winchester until she retired. So she got into a lot of things with him through that also. So they were always together and supporting each other.
Like my father, I'm hard of hearing, so thank you for clarifying the question we were on. In terms of family, my father was my my mother gave my father a family he didn't have. He grew up in a place that, you know, the parents weren't always living together. So it was a very difficult place to grow up. So my mom gave the family. In terms of notability, I think it's what he did for Handley. I think it's what he did for people, what he did when the state senate. He believed passionately in helping people and caring about people. And over time, his philosophy changed a little bit. I think he got into the Senate and realized he had the ability to bring money back to the city, to do good things, to take care of the people he loved. And those are the things I think make him most notable.
Kim, this was the hardest question, I thought.
Number 6.
Yeah, that's the mom. Because, I mean, there were 1,000 different ways that my mom was supportive, and there was no single thing I could single out. And yet, you know, she was an optimist, and she had a great sense of humor, and she had every reason not to be. I mean, she was 2,200 when she was 8 years old. She lost her father when she was 9. Her husband died when they were 35. And yet, she was a whole lot of fun to be around. So I just think, you know, that sort of optimism in the face of all that tragedy, what inspired me, I know.
David, I'm going to depart here for a second. Take a second, and we haven't talked about this, but I have confidence that he can handle this.
Madagascar for 600, Alex. Oh.
Talk a second about the value of this community to you and your mom when your dad suddenly died.
Yeah. That man right there is part of it. You're just trying to get me to cry.
We made a pact.
Yeah, there was never any confusion about it. You know, we were in Maryland, Dad dies very suddenly, and Winchester was where we were going. And there was no discussion or debate because it felt like home. And we got back here and we bought a house, or she bought a house, and stayed with Hunter and Janet Maddox for about 6 weeks as I was finishing up 6th grade. And Jimmy Umps and John Capehart, and who else, Jimmy? Was Russ in on? Russ would have not been here then, so. Yeah, but they painted our house. They painted the entire interior of our house while, you know, we were staying with Hunter, and Hunter was probably in on it. But, I mean, just such incredible support. And
this is where your mom decided to come back to, even though she'd only been here about 5 years.
right, right. But it was just, it was such a nurturing place. And just the web of people, you know, that supported us. And it was incredible. And a lot of it revolved around that school. You know, I tell more people about going to Handley than I do to Duke, mainly because I work with a lot of UNC people. But you know, I mean, it's so unique, and the people of Winchester live philanthropy every single day, and a lot of them don't even realize it. And it's just magical. And as my boss likes to say, I'm thinking of her dad, when he's raising money, he does have a gift for it. This is the least I'll ever ask you for. So anyway, that's a roundabout way of just saying that it's such a nurturing community, and we shouldn't take it for granted.
Agreed. Beautifully said.
I made it up.
My dad, of course, was so outgoing, and he would talk to anybody. And my mom was the complete opposite. She was an introvert. And everywhere they went, everybody would go, "Oh, Charlie's here, Charlie's here. Oh, hi, Jenny." And I know that was really hard for her. She was used to it, but it was a little difficult at times. But they were together. They just barely made 73 years together. And one of the great things about Mom that amazed me, quite frankly, is after all those years, she still laughed at his dumb jokes. And to me, that is a true sign of love in a good marriage. And it could be, I don't know, maybe she didn't remember all of them, so she thought they were funny. But anyway, she supported his community involvement, entertained people, had people stay at their homes from England, and she did everything she possibly could have done because she was devoted and she really loved that guy. I'm really proud today that my brother Steve is here with his wife Judy, and my brother Phil's here with his wife Linda, and my sister Ann is here. So thank you all for being here. But we all wanted to show our pride in our dad today.
So my mom is here. She's in the front row. And their relationship wasn't as one forged at Handley. They got together towards the end of my dad's graduation in '75. Dad was a little slow to realize how much Mom liked him. You know, I think if from her perspective that could have happened a couple of years earlier, but you know, ultimately she won, which is always good because it means I came around. But you know, in some ways, you know, Dad working in the ER, he works strange hours. And he would work days, he would work nights. You know, and I never really begrudged him for it because that meant that he was helping people that needed it. But you know, from that side, you know, that was one side of the coin. The other side of the coin was, you know, Mom was the one who was keeping us all on track, you know, keeping us together. You know, and they also always loved the same things. You know, if you know the Powers, you know, we love Winchester and Shenandoah Valley history. You know, and so many different projects, different boards, different committees, whatever it was, they were always either on it together or, you know, one was on at one time, one was on at the other, and they were switching back and forth. You know, so whatever projects or, you know, whatever it is that we were working on, the end product was always better because of their communication, because of their love for each other, and it's something that I strive to live to every day.
All right, so let's go to the Father's Day theme. And what do you think your father thought was the most important thing for him as a father to teach you and your siblings? And did he succeed in doing that?
Start with me.
Yeah.
So we'll go back down the line. I think one of the most important things that Dad taught me was service to the community and to lead through service and lead by example. You know, I've tried very much to live that. I think in a lot of ways, well, I don't think, I know, he told me, you know, that my work at for those who may not know, I work at the Museum of Shenandoah Valley, so I get to live, you know, Winchester and in Valley history every day. I get to do what he really would have loved to have been able to do, you know, if he hadn't gone into the medicine field. People ask me for years, are you going to be a doctor like your dad? And I'd say, hell no. And that was, you know, from an early days, he told me, you know, do what you want, you know, don't necessarily follow me into medicine. You know, and kind of just, you know, his love for this place, you know, came out in everything he did. And as of last year, I just moved into my grandmother's old house above the old hospital, actually right above where I was born. And I don't know how many of you know this, but if you're passing the statue of George Washington at the headquarters museum, that's actually Dad's torso. He was the same height as a 16-year-old George Washington. We actually have some great photos of him posing for that statue. And so now, you know, when I get to walk downtown, I actually make sure to go past Torch. I don't think I would have told you this. Make me terrible with it, but I will walk past that statue and say, "Hi, Dad."
Sweet.
When we were kids, Dad used to take us to sell brooms, Lions Club brooms. And we hated it. So he was trying to teach us early on about doing our civic duty and always looking out for others less fortunate. And most of us have been involved in civic groups. My brother Steve's been volunteering at the Sinclair Clinic for 27 years. So he just instilled that in us. It was important, and we all feel that way. We want to give back to the community and make an impact and do our duty.
So what did my dad teach me? When I was in 3rd grade, he had me taking his 9th grade math tests. And it wasn't because he thought I was any, I don't know, prodigy, but he was just trying to figure out why these 9th graders couldn't get it. You know, so it rubbed off to a certain extent. But more seriously, I think the thing that he carried was respect for every individual. And you talk about your dad talking to everybody. There was a good bit of that and respect for the individual. And, you know, the Star had a piece not long ago about, 1966 being the first integrated team. And I think the black players sensed that about him, that he was fair. And I hope I've inherited that.
I just want to thank my mom and Emily and Lena to be here and everyone else who came out to hear us talk about our parents. In terms of what I remember, like his favorite statement was, "Get some fire about you." And he also said, "Never give up." So what he taught us was the importance of dedication and hard work, but also to take care of those who have come behind us. My father was grateful that a man was able to help him get into the University of Maryland. He didn't have money for it. He graduated, was going to a Handley football game. Guy said to him and said, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, And he's like, "Well, we're going to make something about that." So that's one of the things he did. He did a lot of talking for people, sending letters to people, helping with JA, finding money to basically get the kids to help the generation. And I think that's what we carry with us and what I carry with me. I look behind because I'm about to retire in a couple of years. My job is to bring up the generation that comes behind us. And if we continue to do that, we'll be in good stead. Thank you.
Again, I reached out to my little brother to help with this one, because to me, what Dad always was about was giving back to your community, to the people who have helped you get where you are, and to give somebody else a helping hand. My brother remembered him trying to get a point across one time that you should always keep your word, that a person's word was the most important thing they had. And he told a story about when the night he was heading out to his senior prom, not being 21. He was a little behind everybody, but he was not 21. My brother did. And Dad happened to look over in his fire department boots, because he was a volunteer at one of the local fire departments, and there was a bottle of Jack Daniels that Scott was planning on taking to the prom with him, not being 21. So Dad took the bottle of Jack and put it away and said, "I'll give this back to you when you turn 21. He put it away, and when Scott turned 21, he handed him the bottle of Jack and said, "Now, I am a man of my word, and I expect you to always be a man of your word." That's good. And that was what came to his mind when I asked him your question. So evidently, he got his point across.
That's great. That's a good story. For me, basically, it comes back to he taught me selfless service. We saw it in his everyday actions, just to serve others, and that was family, friends, fellow Handlians. Just learned what that means, selfless service.
Can I add something?
I knew he would.
No, I'd just like to say about Wendell Selden, I mean, how long was he a referee?
Oh my gosh, 40-some years?
I mean, if there's not a more thankless job on the face of the planet, I mean, the grief you take, my goodness. And I mean, those black and white stripes just scream public
He
service.
got good training as a city manager, though.
All right, well, we're wrapping up. We'll go ahead with question 7, although a lot of this, I think, probably has we'll have a few minutes if anyone here has a question that you'd like to pose, either to the full panel or to somebody individually, okay? My last question was, as the son or daughter of your father, what do you think makes him deserving of the title of notable?
We just sort of alluded to it with my dad. It was longevity. He just did a lot of good stuff for a long time. It's amazing. His city manager, his civil service was 40 plus years, officiating 40 plus years, and National Guard. So he hung around and did good stuff for a long time.
I think the thing that would stand out for me, obviously, Dad did not have the longevity that a lot of these folks did, but that he was always looking for a way to give back. And that kind of rubbed off, I think, on me as I've gone through my life here in Winchester, and that he really cared about the people of Winchester, and especially about Handley, and that sort of rubbed off on us.
Notable, I kind of covered this a little bit in some of my other comments, but in terms of Handley, that man loved Handley. I do remember sitting at the house and looking over my mother and say, okay, where's the Handley game? Flipping around stations, flipping around TV stations, trying to find that darn Handley game. He loved this school, and that's why he was grateful the opportunity to come back here to serve this area, and to raise money for his beloved school. He loved this place. I've never met anyone who loved their high school as much as he does.
Every email, every letter from her dad, go Judges at the end, every single one. So, I'm going to be a little repetitive here too, but I think, building young people of character was what he did in the short time he was available for it. And, but I think, especially coming from a pretty blue-collar background himself, helping blue-collar kids who might not otherwise have gone to college to somehow become achievers and to get an education and live way beyond the football field, I think would be the notable part.
I think I was probably Dad's biggest fan because he was an exceptional human being, in my opinion, in every way possible. His life was dedicated to helping other people, whether it could be strangers, it could be our family, his friends. If anyone was in the hospital, Dad would call them on the phone to check on them. He would send cards. He loved to go to the dollar store and get as many cards as he could. He just thought the dollar store was great. And he was always conscious of trying to leave the planet a better place for the future. He was big on recycling. If you threw a sweet and low packet in the trash, you had to get it out and put it in recycling. He was passionate about so many things, but he really loved Winchester too, and he loved life, and he made a huge difference in a lot of people's lives. So that's why I think he should have been a notable. And by the way, I was afraid he wasn't going to be one because I hadn't seen anything or heard anything. And when Jean finally contacted me, I was like, oh, thank goodness. And it was because it's alphabetical. And, for all of our lives, we're always at the end. But it's okay.
And actually, his hasn't even been in the newspaper yet. But it will be soon.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler. I think, what I can say about Dad kind of reflects everything that we've heard on the table. He loved giving back to the place that made him, that molded him. Dad could have gone a lot of different places, but the first opportunity out of residency that there was an opening in Winchester, came right back and worked for the hospital system until he passed away. And something I want to mention that in the previous question that I was saying, I got choked up and so completely went out of my head. But kind of going back to the idea of family and the continuation of what we've heard about with Handley and history and family. Someone else that I wanted to mention that was a molding figure in his life, but also had a connection to the school, was Lucy Krim, who was Dad's great aunt. And she was one of 2 secretaries at Handley when it first opened. She was born in 1900 and she died in 2007, so she saw
Wow.
the entire 20th century in Winchester. And so that's where, and her first cousin also lived to be 107, so good genes on that side of the family. I think Dad got a lot of his love for history from her because she could remember everything about everybody in town. Unfortunately, she would not let you record it. Same as back in the days when your tape recorders were like a brick size. As soon as you would bring that out, she wouldn't say a word. And just, one kind of quick story to give you an idea of who she was. She was baking full-size turkeys up to 103, and she was in a wheelchair when we were at her house one time, and she was pulling a turkey out, and I offered to pull it out and put it up on the counter for her, and she said, no. 103-year-old lady in a wheelchair picks this thing up, throws it on the counter, the juices go everywhere, and she just said, you can clean that up. And then she just rolled away, yes ma'am, so those are the kind of influences that, that helped shape Dad into who he was.
All right, does anyone
Let's pull this tape
out there
back.
have a question that they'd like to pose?
Let's pull the tape back.
Okay.
Dr. Powers ran a program at the hospital for young kids to show them what the medical field was like. Well, when my granddaughter, who is now 21 and just graduated from JMU, she wants to be a doctor. And she had the best time in that program. And I told Dr. Powers that she was Tommy Wolf's relative. Well, he was so excited because he said, I got to give him the mumps put in school. He thought that was exciting, and he loved that kid. He just took her under his wing. She was special to him, and I love that. And Wendell Selden, I worked in a bank for many years. He was the most meticulous man I have ever seen. He had a savings account book. Every line was perfect, and every number was perfect. And
I have that savings book.
And the last time I saw him, he hugged me and I hugged him, and his bones were so near the surface, it just broke my heart. I did love you.
Thank you.
And your mother too.
Thanks.
Yeah, Medical Explorers was referenced. That was a lot of fun for him, and he loved meeting new people who wanted to go into medicine and help other people. Stitching bananas to show how children's work was a favorite activity, from elementary school for me on. And whenever he was extremely nearsighted, and whenever he had to stitch someone, he would take his glasses off. I'm going to use these again. He would have to get like this close to be able to see, and people were terrified because you have this person, they think that he can't see. He's sticking needles through him. He could see. He just had to get really close to make sure he was doing it right.
I got to follow that up. I remember your dad, and I can't remember exactly where this was, but it was almost like a tailgating situation. And I don't really remember where it was, but a bee landed on his finger. And most people would be swatting or, get off of it, And he was sitting there looking at it. He was just studying it, just looking at it. And it was either a honeybee or a bumblebee, but I was fascinated that he was fascinated so much by it that he didn't swat it away.
I have to tell you a favorite memory that I have many years ago when I turned 50. And I was given a party and with many of my dear friends there. And lo and behold, the Grim Reaper comes coming up in his costume, carrying, and I thought, and he said something, and I recognized his voice. You know who it was? Charlie Sucker.
And did he have a gorilla costume? Because I think he appeared in my husband's 50th.
Oh, wait, did the Grim Reaper have a tooth out?
My cousin Chris had a shop downtown, Confetti, right? Was it?
Yes.
Yeah. And so Dad would deliver, birthday greetings for people through her business. And he loved it. He dressed up like all sorts of crazy people.
That's funny. Linda?
This is for Nick. I knew your dad. He was in my archaeology chapter. And you were talking about George Washington. So we worked on a dig at the headquarters. And we're in the pit digging, scraping. And for some reason I said, whoops. And he stopped and looked at me really serious. He said, that's one word you never say in the eon.
Yeah, there were things you can get away in archaeology that you can't get away with. One of the things, he passed away in 2019, and one of the things that I really took away was people coming up after us and saying, I didn't know that he was interested in A, or he was interested in B or Z or whatever. He had so many interests, that meant he was involved with so many different groups of people, and it wasn't until he died, until that situation where you finally see the synthesis of man, I guess the best way to put it.
Jeff?
I'd just like to say, I can identify with everybody up there. I mean, they're parents, okay? And I'd like to really say to Kim, what a great idea this was. I mean, it was wonderful. I feel like I know a lot about each one of those people there, okay, in my lifetime at Handley High School. And I know how they feel about Handley High School, just like I do, okay? But it's just been wonderful, Kim, and a great idea. Great.
Thank you.
Jimmy,
Yeah.
just don't tell them about where we lied.
All right. Well, we're not going to end with an applause for me. Let's end with an applause for them.